Welcome to Plugged In, the OB Gaming series where we speak with industry leaders and innovators about key challenges, new projects and trends from across the space. I'm Kathryn Spetch and I co-lead our work in the global gaming practice here at Odgers Berndtson Executive Search, working with a huge variety of developers, publishers and service providers to appoint fantastic leaders. And today I am thrilled to be joined by the brilliant Jeff Gardiner. Hi Jeff, how are we?
Good morning. Thank you. It's an honor and privilege to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great to have you here, Jeff. Now, I'm not going to let you get away without a bit of a glowing intro to start with. So Jeff is the founder and chief exec of Something Wicked, an ambitious, exciting and hugely innovative new studio, which we will come on to. And he has worked on fantastic IP throughout his career, the Elder Scrolls and Fallout franchises, to name but two. And today I've got a few questions to put to Jeff, so hopefully we'll have some really interesting discussion. Now, for those of you who tuned into Gamescom Opening Night Live back in August, they will have heard Jeff talking about Something Wicked games. But for those who didn't, Jeff, it would be great if you could give us a brief intro to what you're striving for and what it's all about.
Sure. Again, I've been in the games industry for just about it'll be 21 years in January, which it makes me a dinosaur, I guess.
You don't look it, Jeff. You don't look it.
But I've made it this far, and I've been in development the entire time. I started as a games designer, went into production when I was scooped up by Bethesda Game Studios in 2005. I worked there for almost 16 years. And then, you know, the pandemic hit, a lot of time to self-reflect. I decided to take a break. And after the break, I decided to leave Bethesda, and then I took more time and then decided to open Something Wicked Games. So, you know, Something Wicked Games is a new studio. We hit the ground running in June of last year. We're up to 26 people, if you include the folks that are starting in a month here early in the new year. So we've gotten off the ground really quickly, and we are set out to make an open world preternatural RPG. Similar in the vein of the old IPs that I had the privilege of working on, Elder Scrolls and Fallout. It is set in Portugal. It's a very heavily fictionalized Middle Ages Portugal. We're going to bring a lot of fantasy elements into the game. We have some really neat ideas that we're not talking about because it's still so early, and we want to make sure we can execute on them for everyone. But I'm honored and privileged to be joined by several members of key members from the Fallout New Vegas team from Obsidian, as well as several ex-Bethesda people who have been around the industry now for several years. And we've actually had two folks from BioWare join us as well. So we got really are coming together of some of the masters of craft of the RPG space. And I'm super excited to have this, you know, the privilege to be able to offer these folks a platform to really execute on their ideas and give them the creative space they need to do so.
Brilliant. And we'll come back to creative space because I know it's something that you and I spoke about last time we had a conversation. But you mentioned that, you know, some of the game is wrapped up in mystery for the time being. And I don't want you to be spilling any secrets today, but you mentioned, you know, it is an open world RPG and that's really been your heartland since you've started in the games industry. So what do you think, when you look at that particular genre in the industry, what do you think is most critical to its evolution as we look to the future and without giving away too many secrets?
Oh, sure. Well, you know, I like talking about secrets. I just don't want to reveal secrets about my particular game because, like I said, I don't like to promise things that I can't deliver, especially this early in the process. That said, you know, I, again, have been... So my story is I grew up on Dungeons and Dragons, like so many people in the industry, especially the dinosaurs like me. And there's this idea, there's so many different kinds, being in the video game industry for this long, you've seen this evolution of games, and there's so many niches and unbelievable genres and cross genres, and in tiny, these from tiny little sim games where you're playing, like I'm playing RimWorld again, where you're playing all these different little people and watching the AI interact and do crazy things, to watching my son play Valorant and Overwatch 2 and these shooters. And there's esports now, and there's so, like, when you say video games, it's not like saying movies. Like movies is defined by the narrow genres, you know, science fiction, drama, comedy, horror. In video games, you're not just defining by genre, you're defining by totally swaths of play type. So anyways, open world RPGs means a lot of things to different people. And, you know, to me, there's been a couple of kinds, and you've seen it evolve over the years. You know, Bethesda was really at the spear tip of this in a lot of ways. And I feel like that the things they do and we did are some of the most innovative still to this day. And, you know, in comparison to some of the other open world games that have evolved in different directions. So to me, there's two different kinds. There's the, you know, I'll give you an example. When I played Grand Theft Auto Vice City, I had released, this was early in my career, and we released a game the same day as that got crushed. It was called Defender. No one heard of it because it came out the same day as Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Anyways, we'll talk about that brilliant marketing ploy another time. It didn't work. But anyway, you know, I really believed early on that that was a role-playing game. Now, people say role-playing games, a lot of people think Dungeons & Dragons are fantasy. They think of a specific genre, or they think of different things and say skill systems, the ability to choose a character in the beginning, but the idea that you were a predefined character in a big world, interacting with things, sort of, you know, in between missions, able to interact and do what you wanted was brilliant. And then you saw Morrowind came out right before that, I believe, because I remember I was working on Defender when Morrowind came out, and you saw, you know, an RPG do something different with a big open world space, sort of exploring, and it was very different. Morrowind was like one of those games where you could go in and, you know, you could really break your save. You could kill NPCs that were critical to the main points later, which you could never do in Grand Theft Auto. So anyways, you see these two paths that have begun, and there's like the Ubisoft Assassin's Creed, the Far Cries, and these massive open world games. But then you see the evolution of the other ones where they're more sim-like, which is what Bethesda has done for years. And listen, both have their place. Both are amazing. I've played over 100 hours of the last Assassin's Creed. And I love them both. But for me, I really like ones where you can go in and sort of break your game.
Yeah.
To say it. By that, I mean, you can go in and try and do things to see what happens. That's why I use RimWorld as an example, because that's what you do in RimWorld. It's basically, it's a petri dish game where you're like, so last night I had these little group of colonists. I decided they were starving. There was warg, so I tried to hunt a warg. It killed my main guy, and I was like, oh my God, it's crazy. But that's part of the story. You're telling yourself a story as you play the game. The designers aren't telling you a story. So that's what I like about the type of game, Weird Song. Sorry, the title of the game is Weird Song. We announced in Gamescom. I will talk for hours if you didn't interject here, but so anyway, title, and I will bounce around for such. The title of the game is Weird Song. When we announced an opening night live, which again is early, but we want the fans to come on and get a little piece and watch the developments happen. So we're releasing little bits of concept art and stuff, and we have more plans for next year to sort of involve the fans a little more,
Okay.
and also to recruit. Frankly, this is B2B. Like we decided to do it to recruit, and we did get a lot of great resumes and people who want to be a part of this notion of, you know, this big open world RPG. So anyways, back to that.
Yeah. No, but
Weird Song is more of the latter vein, where we're going to let players go in and have a petri dish where they're experimenting with things and trying things, and we're going to step back and we'll have quests to find and defined gameplay mechanics and such, but we are going to let the player really experiment. We have a lot of neat ideas, and bringing in other genres into the RPG space, and how to sort of mash even more of that in order for players to sort of go into this, again, preternatural medieval land, and sort of see what happens, see what the effects their actions have, the ripples in their universe, and maybe another. Like, we're sort of really digging into this in a very meta sense. You know, we're taking inspiration from not just other games and RPGs, but most modern fantasy, modern science fiction. A lot of the things you're seeing is these commonality threads through especially for this the advent of TV, through like Westworld, and most recently Peripheral, 1899. We're taking all these different ideas and sort of going, that's cool, we'll take this little piece, that's cool, we'll take this little piece, and this overall vision of what this game's going to be. So anyways, open world RPGs to me, and I know this will probably get me pilloried, but they're the true promise of gaming to me. They're like, I play so many games. I'm still such a gamer. And especially now that my kids have basically left, I get to play even more games. But for me, my favorites still are big open world RPGs that I can sink 100 hours into, and not because I feel compelled to play 100 hours of content, just because I'm so enwrapped in that world, and I don't mind. I'm enjoying it. I get to go in and define my play experience.
Yeah.
And those are the games that we are going to continue to make.
Yeah. And it's defining your own escapism as well, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the magic, I think, of these games, is when you get bored doing something, there's 100 other things you can do, right? And none of them are more important than the others. So you can go and you can decide to craft. So we're in a very high sense, we're focused on three. And there's a lot of buzzwords in this industry, and I think they're ill used. So I'm going to use one right now: pillars. So we're focused on 3 pillars, and our pillars aren't defined as game features, they're defined as experiences. So we want the player to be able, our pillars are exploration, creativity, and of course now I'm spacing on it, so you have to edit this out. Exploration, creativity, and adventure, excuse me. So,
Okay.
you know, and I know some of those are cross purposes and some of those blend into each other. That's the point of these.
Yeah.
But we'll look at a new feature and go, what is it? How does it feed these 3 things? Right? How, is a player able to be creative here? Is a player getting a great exploration experience, or is a player being an adventure? So to give some loose definitions to those terms, in terms of like pinning games, like to me, the brilliance of Elden Ring was exploration, right? It was an unbelievable game of endless exploration. You could go back to zones over and over again and rediscover not only, and it wasn't mechanical, it wasn't like pre-prescribed, it was these organic experiences and these things that are just, again, to this day, that is still the most common game. I think that game has shifted the open world genre in the correct direction. Creativity, you look at games like Minecraft, Valheim, other game, and in even more RPGs that allow crafting. And so we're going to end in some of those spaces as well. And then the third is adventure, and being able to set out, and I am setting the pace of my adventure story and in skill trees, and in being able to like feel a progress in the game and gain experience and learn new things, not only the character, but maybe if we tell a good enough story, maybe you'll be able to learn some stuff about yourself as well, be able to reflect on the nature of things.
Brilliant.
Lofty goals.
Yeah, well, you got to have them though, right?
Yes, you got to have them. Yeah.
And I mean, you know, exploration, creativity, adventure. When you think about some of those people that you've managed to bring on board to the studio that you're really, really excited about, I suppose that, you know, take it even outside of the game, the opportunity gives those people all 3 of those things as well for their own careers. And I think,
no, absolutely. We have set this up, like, we are really excited to be like, we're very picky on who we're bringing in, and you know, we have, again, like, you sort of look at some of this from a business perspective, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you know, you want to make sure people are aligned with your core values as well, you know, and we have ours, and especially because we're fully remote. So, you know, we're very big on trust. We want to give people the tools and time they need to build things. You know, we also want people to feel a sense of purposefulness, being that when, you know, a lot of us come from these huge studios that went from like a reasonable number. I remember back in the day when 75 people was an unbelievable amount of people on a game. My first game was 15 freaking people, you know, and it was considered at least AA. And then you know, when you look at, you know, the sense of purposefulness, when you're up to so many, like, how can we grow to a reasonable number and still give people a sense of they're not only part of something really cool, but they're contributing. Their contributions to this game have meaning, and they can tell their friends, I did this, because, and this was my idea, not I got a list of tasks and made furniture today. Like, so there's a push pull there, there's a blend. And then you know, also a sense of adventure is a big part of like how I've sort of lived my life. Like, I believe in calculated risks and doing things, and not doing stupid things, but doing things that are, you know, again, like thinking about things deeply and going boldly into the unknown and seeing what happens, right? That's where the greatest rewards are. That's where the risk is too. But I don't know, you have one life, and you might as well take some chances and see what happens. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. And, you know, I think we've said before, making a hit game is very difficult, far more difficult than people, certainly from outside of the industry, ever imagine it is. So those risks are required to get those big wins and those exciting moments. And part of that is absolutely the creativity that we've talked about. But again, there's no kind of ABC guide as to how to be creative and how to find creative success. And then also there's a balance between that creative vision and the commercial feasibility. And that's, I mean, it's important for every business, but arguably in an early stage business, you need to find that commercial feasibility quickly if you're looking at further funding and investment. So how is that something that keeps you awake at night? And
that's,
you know,
that's about the only thing that keeps me awake at night. You know, there's always in my mind, and I've learned so much from being a part of video games, and so I get to frame my worldview from that. And my worldview is that, you know, you have to have, I drive my spouse crazy because I can argue both sides of the argument, like vehemently, as if I truly believe it. And I think any designer will start doing this because there's always there's these decisions that there's no good decision, right? I call it the least bad. What is the least bad decision? And so that's true. And when you're starting your studio up, like, listen, you have to have, I believe in creativity. And this is going to sound like buzzwordy stuff, but it's really been my working philosophy for years. And I think part of the reason I hope people find what I've done successful is you have to find creativity works best within boundaries. And I have personal examples from my life where this were true. And I'll tell you one now. I was a creative writing arts. I got my bachelor's in creative writing arts, and there was all these different tracks, and I focused on drama and fiction, but there was a poetry track, and I took poetry with this old teacher who was famous he was very well known in the school. And I remember going in there, like I was 19 years old, and really, really, really passionate person. Like, I'm sure he just laughed at so many of us. Anyways, I didn't like the fact that I had to write, very specific, metered, rhymed poetry within the sonnets and stanzas and iambic pentameters, all these words. I was like, I just want to write what I want to write, free prose. And then you realize upon that, when I force my mind to work within these very strict parameters, I discover things that I wouldn't have otherwise done in a free-flowing consciousness because I have these guidelines. And I saw that personally then. I still see it personally in my life. When I work within a set of parameters, I actually get better results. And then I watched some show years ago, I think it was 60 Minutes, and they talked about Picasso and how, when you look at his paintings, like, to an untrained eye, you're like, what is this? What am I seeing? And then you look at his early work, and he could recreate a still life almost to photo level realism, right? So I think sometimes you have to know the rules in order to be able to successfully break the rules. If you're just not know the rules, you're not really breaking rules because you have no rules. Yeah. This is very high level philosophy. So anyways, getting back to the game creating business, we set guidelines. Like, I am setting high level, like I describe the pillars of the game. And within those pillars, I give the creative people the freedom to figure out what you want to do, like, have fun. And the ideas will come up with are amazing, and we'll make sure they fit within these pillars. And then I have been a producer, like I was a designer for the first quarter of my career and a producer for the last 3 quarters. So I have learned to constrain that within reasonable constraints. Yes. And so we sit there in early days in pre-pro. It is free flowing. We're writing a lot of paper documents. We're noodling in Unreal 5. We're doing all sorts of things just to get the vision, to understand what the game's going to be. And there's no boundaries. I say there's no limits here. And the producers put little cry emojis all the time. And I was like, I do not care. Right. And what we'll do then is, what we're doing is we're getting the ideas down. We're making sure everyone's got buy-in, again, back to the purposefulness. And then we'll take metrics of how long these things take to make. We'll then add at least 30, if not 50% to what they took. And then we'll come up with a schedule. I am a massive believer in schedules. I cannot tell you, anyone who has worked with me will hear me rail on this forever. I understand that 3 years from now, I have no idea what's going to be going on. At the same time, I want to have a schedule that's telling me what it is. So as I'm going ahead and breaking rules, I know what rules I'm breaking. I'm not just freewheeling, acting like a crazy person, just throwing features into the game, right? And it is a job of a good production team to allow the creatives their space, but then to warn them when they're about to drive off a cliff. To give them the panoply of options. Here's your options today. You can do 5 of these 10 things. You get to pick which 5, but you can't do all 10. And then to stack rank and focus and reprioritize. It's a daily reprioritization. So anyways, I have made my career on shipping games on time to a high quality, right? And we need to focus. There needs to be a push-pull between those 2 things, because it's actually best for creative, in my opinion, to work within reasonable boundaries and guidelines. And there's a way to do this. I used to give talks on creative management because it is so important to me. And as a creative person myself, you need to empathize and understand what they go through. It's not a faucet you turn on at 9 and a faucet you turn off at 5. It is this organic process. Like, I'll wake up in the middle of the night, write ideas down. Like, I can't sit down at 9. I'm going to be creative for 7 hours today. Like, it's absurd, right? So you have to give them their space and allow them to fail and allow them to go down blind alleys, because nothing teaches you better than these blind alleys. Those are where you learn your biggest lessons, and the features you cut. I mean, honestly, like, it's horrifying to cut a feature that 10 people have worked on for 3 years, but it is so important to do in the end. Otherwise, you're not going to ship a product. And you need to be able to do that stuff and understand that the learning process you got from that was just as valuable as the feature itself in the game. I part of me feels like maybe an investor shouldn't hear me say that stuff, but
well,
it's actually true. And you need to be able to do these things and understand that. And that's why, like, again, like I wake up every day these days so happy to be doing what I'm doing. And it's like, it's really it's reinvigorated me. And this whole endeavor has been so amazing. And there will be hard times. I see a lot of studios and a lot of people like, it's going to be easy and we're going to figure out a way to do this without working hard. And I wish I could say that. I really do. But at the same time, I have found nothing worthwhile in life comes easily. I just don't know what to say. It's not the way the world works. It's not the way this universe was designed, in our shared simulation we live in here. And I didn't set those rules. Somebody else did. And so there is a way to do that on an individual level. You're not breaking people, right? Where it's more of a labor of love than a being driven like by like some kind of a horrible relationship with management or something. That is terrible. And you want to keep it to those goals, and if you look at individuals and you let them keep doing the best they can do in taking care of their needs, you have a magical formula for amazing games, amazing creative properties in general.
Yeah. And you meant, you kind of make the joke about investors and listening in, but as a founder, you have a role to play in protecting that creative environment whilst also being the person that is balancing the commercials at the very beginning, and it's about protecting it to make sure that it gets to the point where it can be the best that it can be. And people have failed to ensure that you get the best outcome. So I don't think it's too much of an issue. We can edit it out if you like, Jeff. And it's interesting, you're talking about, well, you mentioned the blend of your experience, designer and through creative, and then moving into production, and the importance of balancing time and hitting deadlines, which is critical in the industry and doesn't always happen. That's quite it's a very process-driven approach that makes that successful. But in terms of the way that you've chosen to hire people, it's actually very free-flowing and gives lots of freedom in that you are now a fully remote studio and are going to continue that down the track. Has that been challenging? Do you think that's had a positive, negative impact on creativity?
It is the only reason Something Wicked Games exists is because of the fully remote nature of the studios. I am blessed to be able to hire a lot of veterans, and it has been traditionally very difficult for senior people to leave, because oftentimes you have to move your whole family across the country or to other countries, and it is no small task to ask people to do this. So I have most of the people I have are senior people with family and their kids are in high school, or they want, so I have people. I am employing in 2 provinces in Canada and I think 8 or 9 states in the United States. So we are staying remote. I'm not going to ask these folks to come meet me in the exact middle of the country at any point, other than to get together, which we are doing. I believe that if you operate a studio like it was 10 years ago, you will fail. You need to change the way you work in order for remote work to be successful. You have to. I'll give some examples of what Something Wicked Games is doing. And I will say that I do miss interacting with people, and some of the creative banter it's not difficult, it's different. And again, what you need to do, to me, you need to communicate a lot. And now there's this thing where you can definitely drown people in meetings, and there's a lot, and I've seen that in the industry. So we're trying to be good about this, but at the same time, we need a lot of FaceTime and a lot of time to talk. We are willing and have gotten together to travel. So if we find that there are creative roadblocks or difficulties in communication coming from remote work, we have and will continue to schedule get-togethers on either a small scale or the whole team. Okay. The whole team is getting together in May. I think it's very important to FaceTime. I can't believe I'm working with people that I've never personally met. And I'm looking so forward to this trip that we've planned. But, so you just have to operate differently. One of the things we're doing is we're just upping the frequency of meetings. For instance, a team meeting is, at least in my experience, is traditionally once a month. We are literally doing them every week. And then we're going to have a bigger one once a month where we're diver deeping. Wow. diving more deeply into particular subjects or whatever. For instance, we have the first draft of the story. Next month, we're going to have a big team meeting where the narrative leads are going to bring us through the first draft of the first draft of the story. So you have to, but we do touch base every week. We also have multiple, and again, you'll hear these things, but we have really put an emphasis on them in Something Wicked. Is we have water coolers 3 days a week, where we just open up a meeting for half hour, an hour and chat about whatever subject. Sometimes it devolves into some specific game features. Oftentimes it's about, I don't know, 4-wheel driving or some weird, we go on these weird tangents. And then also we're actually playing games together. Part of the culture is we are playing games every Friday. We pick games and we all play together as a group. And I think it's super important, both to analyze modern games and some of the features they're doing, but also just, again, to get sort of this feeling of a comfortability so we can ask questions. And again, it comes from the managers that I have, the directors I have. Like, we are a reflection of what we want in the studio. So we are open door policy. We get on chats all the time. We use all the tools at our disposal. The bitter irony of the world right now is there's so many communication pathways. There's almost too many. So, so the net positive to me of being able to hire wherever and get the best people is amazing. And you just have to really be conscious of the negatives of that feeling of isolation or the lack of connectedness. And you have to proactively work at those things. And if you pretend like they're not issues or that they won't become problems later, I think you'll be walking into a trap. Some indie studios, and I'm friends with some of them and been taking counsel from them, have been doing this long since before COVID. And they have faced a lot of these difficulties, right? And what they did is what we're trying to do. And I just try to learn from others who have gone before me. And they do a lot of this work. And it is never, and you just have to be cognizant of it. You really do. But ultimately, again, I believe it will minimally be net neutral, hopefully positive. Again, it's about the culture of the studio you want to create, right? And the remote or togetherness is not necessarily an inhibitor to that or whatever the opposite of that is, or a positive for that. You have to work at it as a management group. That's it.
And it's easier to, I'm saying, I don't want to use the word easy because I know that you'll have had lots of sleepless nights about lots of things starting the studio, but it's easier to embed it from the beginning of a studio. When you look at, and you mentioned there's indies that have been around for a very long time that have done this brilliantly, and who COVID wasn't this huge issue for, like it was for some of the larger organizations. And it's really difficult to retrospectively fit it into your culture or your way of working. So I feel for, the bigger studios and organizations that nobody has the answers, unfortunately, as to how best to, because that communication then becomes much more difficult than it is in somewhere such as Something Wicked Games at this stage. So it's brilliant that it's baked in from the beginning.
I agree. I definitely have an advantage building it from the ground up because it's immediately part of our culture. We're hiring people who are okay with it and actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
And listen, we are also not walking blindly into the fact that, like, I'll give you an example. I am nervous about our Games Day Fridays because we have been, a dozen. Now we're getting in the high 20s. In the new year, we're going to be in the mid 20s number of people. That's going to be too many people on the channel to have any kind of meaningful conversations, right? So we're going to have to break these down. But we were talking about these things ahead of time and knowing that, like, listen, we're going to have 2 channels. We're going to have to divide the directors up so everyone's getting FaceTime with us. You have to be proactive about this stuff and be bought into it, right? And so, and again, like because we're ground up doing this, we are hopefully well positioned to be very successful and ship a game in a few years.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Jeff. It's been brilliant, really interesting. And I will look forward to catching up in the very near future.
I appreciate your time today. Thank you again, Kathryn.
Thanks, Jeff.